Hey guys, tonight we ease into a story where wine flows, masks slip, and a very sleepy god accidentally changes human culture forever. You're standing on a misty mountainside, sandal straps loose, breath fogging in the cool morning air. The olive trees sway gently below, whispering rumors, and a goat, not entirely sober, wanders past. You're on Mount Olympus, where the gods are awake, maybe, and one in particular has already lost his cup. Dionysus, god of wine, madness, and theatrical. Chaos is reclining sideways in a grapevine hammock, humming tunelessly to himself. He's supposed to attend some cosmic council about fate or seasons or something. Honestly, he stopped paying attention after the Third Era. You, meanwhile, are stuck with him, assigned to keep an eye on his divine errands. Congratulations. You probably won't survive this. Dionysus is many things, but predictable is not one of them. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint through the golden morning haze and notice Dionysus is wearing two different sandals. One's his, probably. The other may belong to Artemis. He doesn't seem concerned. Shoes are a suggestion, he mumbles, swirling a goblet filled with something disturbingly magenta. He offers you a sip, then forgets he did, and drinks it himself. Despite being a god, Dionysus has the energy of a hungover theater major who found out he's immortal halfway through improv class. Unlike his celestial peers, who maintain temples, hurl lightning, or keep track of harvests, Dionysus mostly wanders around rural hillsides inventing new ways to enjoy fermented fruit. You followed him here because, technically, he said something about seeding divine inspiration among the mortals. What that actually meant was dragging you to a forgotten vineyard on the edge of Boeotia, where he promptly passed out in the sun. Still, your job is to observe. So you sit down in the grass next to a small shrine covered in ivy and assorted snack offerings, figs, barley cakes, and, somewhat confusingly, a single sock, probably symbolic, or just a very bad offering. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was always this strange, or whether the myths bent around his chaotic energy like a toga in the wind. Some scholars think his cult originated in Thrace or Phrygia, fringes of the Greek world, and only later got adopted into the official pantheon. That might explain why his rituals are more unstructured. In one version of the myth, he arrives on Olympus late, the last god to join the party. In another, he's born twice. First from a mortal woman, then stitched into Zeus's thigh after lightning prematurely ended her life. Either way, he's got that look, someone with too many backstories and not enough sleep. You tug your cloak tighter as the wind picks up. Dionysus burps softly, the scent suspiciously floral, and murmurs something about dream goats. He's clearly not fully awake. His panther, oh yes, he travels with a panther, is curled beside him, snoring lightly and twitching its ears. Below in the valley, you spot a cluster of mortals beginning to gather. They're setting up crude stalls, stacking amphorae, and trying to hang garlands on anything that doesn't move. It's some kind of festival. Maybe they knew Dionysus was in the area. Maybe they're just always like this in spring. A small girl in a yellow tunic shouts something about getting the singing masks, and her brothers bolt off in opposite directions, one wearing a goatskin as a cape. Their mother sighs so deeply you can hear it from the hillside. You settle in, the soft rustle of vines around you. The air is thick with distant laughter, sheep bleats, and the occasional crash of a wine jug being dropped. Dionysus rolls onto his back, eyes closed. "Let them do what they will," he mutters. "Sometimes the mortals are wiser when they think no one's watching." You're not sure that's true. One man just tried to balance a basket of grapes on his head while doing a cartwheel, but fine, you'll go with it. Meanwhile, down below, something's brewing. Besides wine, something theatrical, accidental, a bit ridiculous. But it all starts here, with a sleepy god, a panther pillow, and a village party spiraling slightly out of control. Dionysus doesn't do structure. You learn this quickly, as the morning bleeds into a warm, lazy afternoon, and the god of wine remains horizontal, wrapped like a lazy burrito in a stolen tapestry from some past banquet. His panther has migrated to your lap. You try not to move. You definitely don't want to wake it. The mortals down in the valley, however, are very awake. In fact, they're buzzing with an almost alarming amount of enthusiasm for people preparing. A party with no real schedule and questionable leadership. They don't seem to care that their patron deity is currently using a basket of figs as a pillow. Instead, they move with the chaotic optimism of a wedding planned by 12 toddlers and one goat. You watch as a man attempts to build a stage out of barrels and old cartwheels. Another is yelling instructions while accidentally lighting a garland on fire. No one seems bothered. This is, apparently, tradition. See, Dionysus is not like the other Olympians. Zeus hurls lightning, Poseidon commands seas, Athena lectures you about olives. Dionysus? He inspires, mainly through vague vibes and fermented beverages. There are no rules, or rather, the rules change depending on how many amphorae have been emptied. In some parts of Greece, the festivals held in his honor were small and intimate. In others, they resembled a full-blown civic holiday meets costume parade meets wine-fueled group therapy. What they all had in common was this: masks, music, and the blurry line between sacred rite and performance art. Today, you're watching one of the unstructured versions, a pop-up Dionysia, if you will. The priest, well, more of an enthusiastic farmer with a robe, climbs onto the wobbling stage. He clears his throat, opens his arms wide, and promptly forgets what he was going to say. A nearby teenager hands him a scroll. He squints. The sacred hymn of the grapes, he mumbles. Let us begin. There is no hymn of the grapes, but they improvise. A group of young men in goat costumes prance forward, bleating rhythmically as an elderly woman shakes a tambourine with the focus of a general preparing for battle. It's mesmerizing, also slightly terrifying. Are they doing a tragedy or a comedy? You whisper to Dionysus. His only reply is a low snore and the soft clink of a wine jug rolling downhill. Historians still argue whether Dionysian rituals were meant to be pure religious ceremonies or proto-theatrical performances. The answer might just be yes. The blurring between worship and storytelling was intentional, an invitation for mortals to lose themselves, to wear another face, to embody myth. You watch as a man in a feathered mask delivers a speech about a king who angered the gods by refusing wine at a feast. The crowd gasps in mock horror, then cheers when a woman in a bird costume punishes him by flinging grapeskins at his face. It's something. Not quite a play, not quite a ritual, but everyone is completely invested. Even the goats, Dionysus mutters in his sleep. Tell them not to forget the chorus. Sure enough, a group of masked dancers begin to chant in unison, weaving between the audience, stomping rhythmically. Their voices a mix of nonsense syllables and occasional references to last year's wheat harvest. It doesn't make much literal sense, but there's something deeply human about it. The masks, by the way, are made from wood, linen, and whatever materials were on hand. One looks suspiciously like a painted turnip. Another is clearly a reused scarecrow head with a fake beard. Glued on. And yet the expressions they convey, wide-eyed surprise, tragic despair, wine-induced glee, are oddly effective. It hits you suddenly. This isn't just a party, it's storytelling, shared out loud and alive, powered by improvisation and collective memory. No scripts, no audience passivity. Everyone participates, even if it's just waving a fig branch or dramatically fainting into a wine jug. And Dionysus, still napping. You glance over at him. A bee lands on his cheek. He waves it off without opening his eyes. He's listening somehow. Absorbing. Or maybe just dreaming about cheese. It's hard to tell. You lie back beside him, letting the hillside cradle you. The sounds drift upward, Laughter, hooves, flutes slightly off-key. The scent of thyme and smoke wafts through the air. From this angle, Olympus feels distant, formal, sterile. But here, in this sun-drenched chaos of mortals playing gods and gods pretending to sleep, something new is happening. Something like theater, or at least the vague, wine-stained prelude to it. By late afternoon, the festival has entered what ancient party scholars might call the peak chaos phase. You're still on the hillside, half-baked by the sun, draped in vines, while Dionysus slumbers like a particularly decadent log. The panther is now curled under your bench, purring like a drunken accordion. You've accepted your fate. Below, the humans have apparently decided the best way to honor a wine god is to stop planning entirely and let the party evolve. This, of course, leads to some truly bizarre developments. Take, for example, the ritual of the spinning amphora, where a boy in a tunic 3 sizes too big is blindfolded and spun in a circle while others chant, "Where shall the wine go? Where shall the wine go?" until he collapses, dramatically pointing at a random elder. That elder must then deliver a toast in rhyming couplets, or attempt to, and immediately forget halfway through, causing a ripple of sympathetic clapping. You try not to laugh, loudly anyway. This unscripted chaos seems to delight the villagers more than any sacred rite. What was originally a harvest ritual has become a community improv jam. The line between worship and entertainment has dissolved like old parchment in rain. Historians still argue whether these early festivals were meant to be solemn or satirical. Some inscriptions suggest deep reverence, others crude jokes about turnips and satyrs with oversized ambitions. Likely, both coexisted. The Greeks didn't separate the divine from the ridiculous. They invited them to dance together. A group of children, probably unsupervised for far too long, begin rehearsing a skit involving a talking donkey and a grumpy oracle who predicts flatulence. The adults don't stop them. In fact, one offers musical accompaniment using a flute with only 3 working holes. You glance at Dionysus, still asleep, but his smile twitches slightly at the corners. He's definitely listening now. One thing becomes clear. The mortals aren't just playing. They're exploring stories, experimenting with characters, and testing which tales stick in the mind, and which ones make Grandma laugh so hard she snorts grape juice. And yet, for all its spontaneity, this festival still follows certain rhythms. There's a call and response to the crowd, a loose arc to the narratives, even if the actors forget their lines and shout, "Pretend I said something wise," before skipping ahead. You start to realize they're inventing tropes. Right here, under the lazy eye of a half-napping deity, you're witnessing the earliest rough drafts of Greek theater, not the polished tragedies of Sophocles or the biting satires of Aristophanes, but the blueprint. One man, dressed in an oversized lion pelt, begins a dramatic monologue about losing his sheep to seduction by a river nymph. His friend, playing said nymph, holds a bunch of celery and flutters his eyelashes so violently you fear for his balance. The audience roars with laughter. The village priest, the same one who earlier forgot the words, returns with a wine-stained scroll and proclaims the official start of Act 2. No one remembers when Act 1 ended, but that doesn't matter. The sun is lower, the laughter louder, and the spirit of Dionysus is alive, even if the god himself is still face down in a pile of olives. Curiously, one of the elders begins passing out clay masks. Some show exaggerated smiles, others weeping, faces, all painted in broad strokes and affixed with string. The children gasp. Even the most distracted goat looks intrigued. The masks are handed to performers and audience alike. Everyone wears one. Suddenly, identities blur. You are no longer you. You are a tragic lover, a dithering servant, a misunderstood satyr with a limp. The mask doesn't just hide, it frees. This concept, transformation through mask, is one historians now link directly to the birth of theater. In these early Dionysian festivals, masks allowed villagers to become archetypes. They shed daily drudgery for something mythic, something wild. And while no records survive from this particular village, Fragments of pottery and vase paintings across the Greek world depict similar scenes: masked choruses, exaggerated gestures, wine-soaked audiences half listening, half reciting. This was not passive consumption. It was ritual participation with a wink. Below, the sun begins to dip, casting long shadows across the makeshift stage. Torches are lit. The colors shift. More oranges, more gold. A woman in a mask shaped like a weeping willow steps forward. Her voice trembles, not with fear, but with genuine emotion. She speaks of Persephone's descent, of longing and return, of seasons both bitter and sweet. The crowd falls silent, even the children, even the goats. The silence hangs, soft and reverent. Then someone sneezes. Then laughter bubbles up again. The mood pivots, light again, never lingering too long in sorrow. Dionysus finally shifts in his sleep, stretches his arms overhead, and yawns loudly enough to make 3 doves scatter. "Well," he mumbles, "they've gotten better." You nearly jump. He's awake. You glance at him, eyes wide. He doesn't look down at the village. Not yet. He simply plucks a fig from the basket, bites it thoughtfully, and says, "Remind me to tell them about stage directions tomorrow." You sit cross-legged on the edge of a fallen amphora, watching the woman with the bronze mask finish her tale with a single whispered word. The silence that follows is like a spell. Not a dramatic silence, just stillness, the kind that falls when everyone forgets to breathe for a moment. And then, as if some hidden conductor gives the cue, the crowd erupts in applause. Not thunderous, not explosive, more like soft rain hitting fig leaves. Hands clapping with sleepy delight. Dionysus sighs, not with boredom, but with the contentment of a god who has just seen mortals figure out something excellent without needing his direct interference. "See," he says, "they don't need temples. They need space to pretend." One of the village elders, wearing a mask upside down for reasons best left unexplored, begins to pass around little bundles of wrapped grape leaves. They're filled with rice, mint, and what might be raisins, or might be extremely confused, beetles. You politely decline. Your stomach, now thoroughly pickled in ambient wine fumes, is not ready for further adventure. A new group of performers takes the stage. This time it's a chorus, 6 men and women, each holding torches and speaking in unison. The flames wobble with each step, casting ghostly light across their masks. They chant, move, gesture, stumble, recover. Their story is about a man who builds a wall so high he forgets what's on the other side. A metaphor, surely, though for what exactly no one is sure. Privacy, pride, neighborly goats. The chorus ends by toppling their own torches into the dirt. An intentional flourish, though one flame accidentally catches someone's sandal on fire. They hop twice, stomp it out, and receive a standing ovation. Dionysus turns to you. "This is why I don't like rules," he says. "They ruin the surprise." Historians still debate how formal these early performances were. Were there scripts? Probably not. Costumes? Maybe. Choreography? If you can call "Don't Trip on the Goat" choreography, then yes. But what matters is that it was shared. Collective. Participatory. Theater, at its sleepy, drunken core, was always about the group. You watch as the villagers start to gather in a wide circle. They don't form rows like an audience. They blend, together. Some wear masks, some don't. Some speak lines, others echo them. Even the local pottery vendor is improvising lines about jugs of fate, with the gusto of a man who's been waiting all year to shine. The torchlight glows golden now. Moths dance through the smoke. A few stars blink into the sky overhead. Someone presses a mask into your hands. It's painted half in joy, half in sorrow. Classic dichotomy. You turn it over in your palms, feel the rough clay edges, the dried paint flaking slightly like old sunburn. It smells faintly of time and someone's lunch. "Put it on," Dionysus says softly. You hesitate, but only for a second. The mask slides over your face. The world shifts. It doesn't go dark exactly, but the boundary between watcher and performer disappears. You are in it now. Not just observing, embodying, a part of the ritual. And that's the real secret. Theater wasn't just created for people to sit and watch other people be dramatic. It was a way to rehearse being human, to try on emotions, to live through endings safely, to laugh at disaster and cry at joy, to test how it feels to become something more than yourself or something less. You step forward, hesitant. Someone hands you a line, scratched on a piece of bark. Tell them I waited at the river. You don't know what it means. You say it. Anyway, the chorus echoes, "He waited at the river!" The crowd gasps. You're not sure why. You glance at Dionysus, who is now lounging against a tree stump, sipping from a clay cup that he absolutely did not bring with him earlier. He gives you a thumbs up and mouths, "Keep going." So you do. Your next line is improvised. "But the river never knew my name." Again, the chorus repeats it. Someone sobs, quite genuinely. A man in the back says, "Oof, that's deep," and wipes his eyes on a goat. And that's when it hits you. This isn't about the performance. It's about the surrender. The sweet, sleepy surrender to story and play. It's about the community coming together to pretend, not because they're escaping reality, but because pretending is reality, sometimes the better part of it. The show continues in gentle waves. Stories bubble up, unfold, fade. The night softens. Laughter becomes quieter, more internal. The torches are fewer now, replaced by starlight and the warm haze of shared imagination. And amid it all, Dionysus walks among the villagers, not as a god-demanding worship, but as one of them. Someone who laughs too hard at a bad pun. Someone who cheers for a surprisingly emotional donkey monologue. Someone who, when a tired child hands him a wooden flute and says, "Your turn," takes a deep breath, blows, and produces a note that makes the leaves tremble slightly. You remove your mask. The clay is warm against your skin. You hold it in your lap, watching the night play out like a dream you'll barely remember come morning. Dionysus returns to your side, smiling. "See," he says, "told you they'd figure it out." You nod. It didn't matter if this was the first play or just the latest in a long line of sleepy storytelling. What mattered was that it happened, that people gathered, that they pretended, that for one golden, olive-scented night, a village became a theater, and a nap turned into art. performer steps forward. She wears a bronze mask of a queen. Her cloak is You wake, or more accurately, realize you were still awake, the way people sometimes do in the middle of a story. There's no clear line between dream and consciousness anymore, just you, the scent of trodden time underfoot, and the far away sound of a goat gently nibbling on a harp someone left lying around. The village has shifted, not ended, just shifted. People aren't performing anymore, not exactly. The masks are off, but the mood lingers. Now there are soft conversations, lullaby-like chants, and the comforting clink of cups being filled, not for celebration, just for the pleasant fact of company. A few performers have curled up on blankets, their roles long since dissolved into sleep. One woman, still holding a shepherd's crook from earlier, is gently snoring into a pillow made of tunics. Dionysus is lying on his back, legs crossed, humming something under his breath. You lie beside him, because at this point, why not? And ask the question that's been circling your head since the masks came off. So, did you actually invent theater? Or was it, an accident? He chuckles, not unkindly. Let's say I gave people the ingredients. They mixed them in their own weird way. Historians still argue about the true origins of Greek theater. Some say it began as a choral ode during spring festivals. Others argue it evolved from ancient mourning, rituals. Still others claim it was always political, a means of testing civic virtues through imagined trials. But sitting here, under a sky so thick with stars it looks like a spilled jar of sesame seeds, it's hard not to believe in the power of accidental invention, especially when it starts with a nap. Most important things do, Dionysus adds, lazily. Language, bread, socks, accidents born of boredom, or hunger, or too much wine. You turn onto your side and watch as a small child walks up to a half-assembled mask and begins gently painting it with a sprig of mint. No one tells her to stop. No one corrects her technique. This, too, is part of the tradition now. The villages. Night has stretched long, unhurried, full of soft moments that spill beyond the confines of scripted time. No one calls final curtain. No one cues applause. The play simply dissolves into shared memory. In the distance, an old man begins, telling a story. Not loudly, just enough for those near him to hear. It's about a foolish hero who thought he could outwit sleep itself. Spoiler, he doesn't. The tale ends with him curling up under a fig tree and snoring so loudly the gods mistake it for thunder. Someone murmurs, "Same," and pulls a goat skin over their head. You turn to Dionysus. So, is this theater, even now? He raises an eyebrow. You mean the bits between the big moments? The slow ones? The quiet ones? You nod. Of course, he says. Especially those. A lot of what survives from ancient Greek drama is grand. tragedies with fate and revenge, comedies full of flatulence and insults. But there was always something softer underneath, moments where time slowed and characters paused and something unspoken passed between them and the chorus and the crowd. Theater was never just spectacle. It was a mirror, and mirrors need stillness to reflect anything at all. Someone nearby starts to hum a tune. It catches on. Another voice joins, then another. It's a melody with no words, or maybe with words long forgotten. You hum too. Not because you know it, but because you feel it. It's slow and warm and slightly off-key, like a lullaby sung by someone who doesn't remember the last verse but figures you're already falling asleep, so who cares? And through it all, Dionysus just lies there, arms behind his head, watching. The sky, as if the stars were his own private slideshow. Want to know the real reason I gave them theater? He says. Sure. He pauses. Because the world's loud. Theater is a way to hear your own heartbeat inside the noise. That surprises you. For a god known for chaos and wine and turning people into dolphins, he's oddly poetic when he wants to be. You let that thought settle like sediment in old wine. Around you, the village becomes dreamlike again. A woman uses her husband's foot as a pillow. A teen mutters lines from earlier scenes in their sleep. A goat tries to eat a script scroll and is gently guided away with a kiss on the nose. No one is pretending now, but the magic lingers. This wasn't just a performance. It was a memory being written in real time. The kind of night people will refer back to, years from now, as the one where the masks came out, or the one where the god showed up and just hung out. No marble inscription will commemorate it. No festival priest will rank it in importance. But it mattered. And as you stretch out beside the god of wine and storytelling, your eyes growing heavier, you understand something quietly profound. Theater didn't need to be invented. It just needed to be noticed, like a nap that turns into a dream, and a dream that gently becomes a story. And now, with your limbs warm from wine, your ears full of distant humming, and your heart thudding in rhythm with the sleepy breath of the village, you feel yourself drift into whatever comes next. Dionysus doesn't say anything. He just smiles. You're not sure how much time has passed. The village around you has fully slipped into the sort of hush that only exists in places without clocks. Somewhere, a dog snores so enthusiastically it sounds like a soft drum roll. The stars above have shifted position, though how long you've been watching them is anyone's guess. Dionysus is still beside you, now humming a tune that has no beginning or end, like a song that was never written down and never needed to be. You sit up, just enough to stretch. Your back pops in 3 distinct places, each one sounding like applause from a very tiny, very sleepy audience. I still don't get one thing, you murmur. Dionysus raises a brow, expectant. You said they didn't need temples, just space to pretend. But eventually they did build temples to you, and theaters, big ones. He sighs. Not dramatically, more like someone who's already halfway through an answer and just waiting for you to catch up. Mortals love a good stone structure, he says. Makes them feel like the fun might last forever. And indeed, it didn't take long before the makeshift masks and goat-scented amphoras of sleepy village nights turned into something grander. By the time of classical Athens, theater had gone from back-alley vine festival hijinks to full-scale productions in places like the Theater of Dionysus, carved right into the southern slope of the Acropolis. Historians still argue whether this transition from improvisational rituals to scripted drama was organic or orchestrated. Maybe both. What's clear is that something shifted. The stories got bigger, the actors fewer, the masks more elaborate, the wine, sadly, more watered down. You blink and suddenly you're not in the village anymore. You're seated on a hard stone bench, midday sun baking your sandals. All around you, a grand semicircle rises into the sky, filled with thousands of people. Citizens in chitons, slaves carrying fans, foreign diplomats squinting suspiciously at the action on stage. The Theater of Dionysus Athens' pride and hangover. Cure is alive with murmurs. The stage is bare save for a painted backdrop of columns and clouds. A single actor enters, masked, stylized robes flowing. He opens his arms and proclaims something deeply philosophical about fate and figs. Probably. You glance sideways. Yep, Dionysus is here too. This time in a front row seat with a fig in one hand and a program scroll in the other. They made this for me, he says proudly, popping the fig into his mouth. Well, not just for me, but you know how mortals are. Slap a god's name on something and suddenly everyone feels important. The performance unfolds in the style of Greek tragedy. Lyrical monologues, dramatic stares into the distance, and chorus members shuffling rhythmically as they deliver moral commentary like poetic sports announcers. It's good. It's very good. But also very polished. You feel yourself missing the goat with the dramatic bleat from earlier. The actor now on stage wails about a long-lost brother who turned into a bird and nested in his own crown. Or something. It's moving, sure, but also oddly safe, like emotion held at arm's length behind a perfectly painted mask. Dionysus leans over. This is the part where they invented catharsis, he whispers. Catharsis. You know, big feelings, safely, letting your soul puke a little, but poetically. You nod slowly. That checks out, and it is powerful. The woman beside you clutches her sandal as the chorus laments the downfall of whichever tragic hero this is. The man on your other side sighs so heavily it seems like he's releasing a decade of regrets. Theater had evolved, no longer just impromptu. Revelry in honor of a napping god. It had become a public ritual, a civic duty even. Athenians considered attending plays a vital part of citizenship. Judges would rank the performances. Prizes would be given. Playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides would become household names, their tragedies preserved on scrolls, copied and recopied for centuries. But part of you wonders, did it lose something in that climb to respectability? Not really, Dionysus says, reading your mind again. It just changed hats. He gestures toward the stage, where the chorus now sings of redemption. The hero has seen the error of his bird-nesting ways. He vows to rebuild his life, probably with fewer feathers. Dionysus smiles faintly. They still feel. They still imagine. Doesn't matter if it's under olive trees or marble steps. A sudden gust of wind lifts a bit of dust from the stone steps, and for a moment, you catch the scent of crushed grape leaves and something more elusive, like memory. The performance ends with solemn bows. The audience stands, applauds politely. A few people throw wreaths of laurel. One kid tosses a half-eaten olive and immediately regrets it. As the crowd disperses, you notice something interesting. People aren't talking about the play so much as around it. They're quoting lines, reenacting their favorite bits. One guy impersonates the chorus with such commitment he trips over his own toga. Everyone laughs. And that's the point. Theater didn't stay alive because it was sacred. It stayed alive because it was repeatable. Because once someone saw it, they had to tell someone else, had to act it out again, had to feel it twice. Even now, long after the masks are packed away and the playwrights have taken their bows, the stories ripple. Outward, Dionysus stands, stretching. Well, he says, that was nice. You rise too, brushing stone dust from your tunic. Where to now? He shrugs. Wherever someone's telling a story, probably, or falling asleep mid-monologue. The crowd thins, the steps empty, the theater quiets, and you follow the god of drama. Not toward another stage, necessarily, but toward wherever the next dream of a story might be unfolding, waiting to catch fire. You're walking downhill now, through a tangle of olive trees whose trunks twist like old men mid-argument. The theater of Dionysus fades behind you, the applause still echoing faintly, like leftover thunder. Beside you, Dionysus kicks a pine cone down the path with idle precision, as though it's a game only he remembers the rules too. The air smells like thyme, dust, and someone barbecuing figs in the distance, which, honestly, you'd like to investigate, but the story's still pulling you along like a lazy river with a firm sense of direction. So, you ask, when did comedy come in? I mean, tragedy's great, but... Dionysus grins. Yeah, it gets a bit shouty after a while, huh? You find yourselves in another gathering place, not as grand as the Marble Theater, but bigger than the sleepy village. A flat field, scattered, with benches. No elaborate costumes this time, just a rowdy group of performers in tunics that have clearly seen better days. One guy's mask is slipping off and he doesn't care. Another's gesturing wildly with a rubber chicken. Yes, really. Welcome to the city Dionysia, the god says with a flourish. This was Athens at its silliest, and in some ways its most daring. The city Dionysia was an annual festival in honor of Dionysus, where poets competed with tragedies and comedies, and the whole city shut down for a week of revelry, drama, and questionable fashion choices. It was equal parts sacred rite and chaotic improv night. Tonight's act? A political satire involving a chorus of sausages arguing about democracy. You're not kidding. The playwright Aristophanes loved stuff like this. One of his most famous plays, The Knights, mocked politicians by having the chorus consist entirely of sausage sellers. It was bizarre, biting, and wildly popular. Comedy, Dionysus says, was where they got to laugh at their bosses without being smited. Usually, historians still argue about just how free speech really was in Athens. Some believe comic playwrights had near total liberty. Others suggest there were quiet limits, unwritten rules that, if broken, could lead to mysteriously empty amphorae at dinner. But in general, comic poets got away with quite a lot. And the audience? They loved it. They laughed, shouted back, threw olives at punchlines they didn't like. It was theater as therapy, as venting session, as public roast. You watch, as the sausage chorus devolves into a dance battle. Someone tosses a turnip. The crowd erupts. One elderly man is laughing so hard he falls off his bench and is gently fanned with a sandal until he recovers. Dionysus is glowing with approval. People think I'm all about ecstasy and wine, he says. But this? Laughter that makes you cry? That's the good stuff. A performer breaks character mid-scene to wink directly at the audience and make a joke about last week's council vote. Everyone howls. Someone tries to explain it to a confused goat who seems unimpressed. And that's when you realize tragedy may elevate the soul, but comedy anchors it. It reminds you you're not alone in your frustration, your embarrassment, your deeply weird ideas. It gives you permission to be human, and then some. You glance at Dionysus, who now has a laurel wreath inexplicably balanced on one ear. You planned all this? He shrugs. Not exactly. I just gave them an excuse. The excuse, it turns out, was ritual drunkenness, what scholars call entheos, being in God or inspired. During Dionysian festivals, people were encouraged to step outside themselves, to become chorus members, to wear masks, to speak as someone else. The lines between audience and performer blurred, and that's how ideas got through, coated in wine and wrapped in song. You look around. There's a sense of looseness here, but not carelessness. The jokes may be crude, but they're clever. The laughter is loud, but it feels earned. And underneath it all is a shared understanding that this absurdity is sacred too. A woman nearby clutches her belly from laughing too hard and mutters, "I think I just repulled my rib from last year." Her friend passes her a fig stuffed with honey and says, "Totally worth it." The show ends with a mock chariot race performed by chorus, members wearing giant papier-mâché bird costumes. No one wins. Everyone cheers. As the crowd filters away, you spot a young playwright in the corner scribbling on a wax tablet. He's got ink on his nose and an air of quiet excitement. He's going to be terrible, Dionysus says fondly, for about 4 years. Then he'll write something that'll make his uncle cry. And just like that, you understand why Dionysus never really left. He didn't need temples or altars. As long as people were pretending together, laughing, crying, dreaming, he was there. Every awkward entrance, every unexpected plot twist, every joke that flops, and every one that lands like thunder. You and the god walk away as the night deepens. The sky turns dark velvet. Someone begins tuning a lyre near a fig tree. Somewhere else, a child rehearses a line from a play he's never seen, but feels like he remembers. You pass a mural, roughly painted on a wall, of Dionysus riding a donkey backwards while holding a bottle and a scroll. Beneath it, someone's scratched a line in clumsy lettering. He gave us stories when silence got too heavy. You smile. That feels true. Dionysus leans in and whispers, "Want to see something even weirder?" Of course you do. You find yourself in the middle of the sea. Not swimming, thankfully. That would be too energetic for this hour, but standing comfortably on the deck of a gently bobbing wooden ship. The sails creak overhead. Salt stings your nostrils. Dolphins leap in the distance, because apparently ancient Greek dolphins were contractually obligated to behave like enthusiastic sidekicks. Dionysus stands beside you, one hand on the rigging, the other holding a suspiciously full wine cup. "This," he says, "is where things get theatrical in a different way." He's not wrong. This isn't a warship or a trading vessel. This ship, strangely ornate and carved with ivy leaves and grapes, is part of a floating performance. You're aboard one of the legendary Dionysian processional ships used in certain religious rites and mystery festivals. It's a mobile stage, a drifting celebration, and possibly the original booze cruise. On shore, people gather to watch. They cheer, sing, and toss garlands into the sea. On board, musicians play flutes and drums. Dancers sway with that relaxed precision that only comes from deep rehearsal and deeper wine. A masked priest recites a hymn to Dionysus that sounds suspiciously like a love letter and a complaint wrapped in one. This is what you might call the immersive theater phase, Dionysus says with a wink. Historians still argue whether these floating festivals were spontaneous village rituals or state-organized religious performances with strict rules. Some say the ship was symbolic, a stage shaped like a boat, never actually sailing. Others insist Dionysus was honored with full-on seafaring parties that docked in multiple towns like an ancient tour. Either way, you're definitely here now. And it's glorious. Someone hands you a garland of myrtle and a lyre you have no idea how to play. You strum it anyway. The sound is creative. Dionysus claps. Perfect. We'll call that chord Regret in G minor. The ship tilts gently with the waves. There's no destination. Not really. Just movement for the sake of joy. And maybe for the excuse to tell stories. Because even here, adrift, half-drunk, sun-warmed and starbound, people are performing. A woman in painted robes reenacts the birth of Dionysus from Zeus's thigh, a scene that somehow manages to be reverent, anatomical, and deeply confusing. A young man interrupts to recite a riddle about grapes. No one gets it, but they all cheer anyway. And you're laughing softly. Not the loud belly laugh of Aristophanic farce, but the quieter kind. The kind that bubbles up from inside because everything just feels right enough. Dionysus pours you a splash of wine. "You ever notice," he says, "how theater never really stayed in the theater?" You hadn't, but he's right. The idea of performance always spilled out. Onto streets, into processions, across borders. Theater wasn't just what happened on a stage. It was a mindset. A way to process life by turning it sideways and peering at it through a mask. He leans on the railing. Mortals try so hard to build walls around stories, but stories don't like being caged. The waves lap softly at the hull. You see now how much of Dionysus's influence wasn't about form, it was about freedom. The kind of imaginative, chaos that lets people sing when they've been silent too long, or cry when they've convinced themselves they're fine, or dance like no one's watching, even when the whole city is. Someone on the deck yells, "Pretend the fish is a god!" and a full improv scene begins, involving a wriggling trout, 3 robes, and a dramatic feint. It's absurd. It's beautiful. You don't even care that the wine's been watered down with seawater. There's a sudden shift. The sky darkens. Not ominously, just softly, like the stage lights dimming for a scene change. The boat vanishes. You're on a street now, a winding alley somewhere in Hellenistic Alexandria. Or is it Pergamon? Hard to tell. The air is full of dust and incense, and the walls are hung with banners. Another impromptu Dionysian procession is moving past. Masked singers, drummers, flute players, and one guy dressed entirely in grapevines. The performances continue, this time in the form of shadow, plays flickering on cloth backdrops. Local kids do a comedic retelling of a myth where Dionysus turns his enemies into dolphins. One of them wears a cardboard fin and keeps slipping in the street puddles. Still performance, still theater. No script, no seating chart, just impulse and expression. Dionysus appears beside you, now wearing sandals made entirely of fig leaves. You. "See," he says, "when people get tired of being themselves, they start pretending, and that's where I come in." You nod. Pretending can be sacred, or silly, or both. He picks up a cracked mask someone left behind and places it gently in your hands. "You don't have to wear it," he says. "But it's there if you need it." You hold it for a moment, tracing the lines of its exaggerated smile. It's simple, carved from baked clay, but you feel its weight. The weight of centuries of laughter, grief, transformation. A wind stirs the banners above. The procession winds off into the distance. The sound of flutes fades. A final child runs past, trailing streamers and shouting, "Wait! I forgot my beard!" You and Dionysus laugh. Then the alley dims, and the world leans toward quiet once more. You're lying in tall grass now, somewhere outside the city. The stars are enormous, lazily burning holes in the navy blue sky, and the cicadas are conducting a soft lullaby nearby. Dionysus lounges beside you, half buried in a pile of cloaks, and figs, humming a tune that sounds like it was invented on a dare. "All right," you say, stretching a bit. "We've had tragic masks, comic sausages, sea-born festivals. But what about the actors? The actual people doing all the shouting and pretending?" Dionysus grins like he's been waiting for that question for hours. "You mean the only mortals who regularly pretend to be gods and live to tell about it?" "Exactly. So he takes you to meet one. Suddenly, you're in a crowded backstage area, carved from stone and shadows. A few oil lamps flicker on hooks, and the scent is unmistakable. Sweat, beeswax, and old fabric. A man is pacing in a circle, muttering to himself. He wears a tunic and a mask hangs at his side. A grotesque, almost cartoonish face with huge, staring eyes and a cavernous mouth. "That," whispers Dionysus, "is Theodokos, star of at least 4 tragedies, 3 comedies, and 1 unfortunate incident involving a wardrobe malfunction in the Frogs. You watch Theodokos prepare. He stretches, breathes deeply, mouths lines with the kind of intensity usually reserved for dodging speeding chariots. You can tell this isn't just performance, it's possession. He becomes the character fully. The mask isn't a barrier, it's a gateway. Mainstream fact. Greek theater actors were exclusively men. Yes, even female roles were performed by men in wigs and high-pitched voices. Acting wasn't just reciting, it was a full-body transformation, especially since ancient theaters were huge and audiences were watching from hundreds of feet away. You needed exaggerated gestures, booming voices, and stylized movements to carry the emotion. And those masks, absolutely vital. They weren't just for anonymity. They amplified sound through their wide, open mouths, like ancient megaphones. It's believed some even had subtle acoustical engineering built in, though scholars still debate just how much projection they actually provided. Still, imagine acting with your entire head encased in a ceramic expression. You couldn't scratch your nose, sip water, or sneeze without breaking the illusion, and probably your neck. Theodokos rehearses one final line, then stills. A young assistant powders his arms. Yes, apparently shiny elbows were a dramatic distraction, and someone gives him a small token, maybe a charm or coin, to tuck into his sandal for luck. Then, with a deep breath, he lifts the mask and steps onto the stage. You peek out from the curtains. Thousands of spectators wait, some fanning themselves with leaves, others already whispering about which character is going to die dramatically this time. The moon casts just enough light to see. The stone benches filled with people, rich and poor, men and women, citizens and foreigners. They've come for catharsis, for escape. For story, Theodokos begins, he's playing Orestes, racked with guilt after avenging his father by, well, murdering his mother. A cheerful bedtime tale. But even though you know the myth, something about the performance pins you in place. Every gesture feels ancient and brand new at once. The language is strange and musical. The chorus chimes in, stomping and swaying in time with the drama. Theodokos collapses to the ground with a wail so realistic you hear a toddler in the back start to cry. Dionysus nods. He's good. Bit much on the dying, though. You watch the play unfurl. Betrayal, anguish, a sprinkle of divine intervention. The tragedy ends, as most do, with questions lingering in the air like the scent of smoke, and as the applause rises, loud and rhythmic, you see Theodokos sag with exhaustion backstage. He peels off his mask. His face underneath is calm, almost blank, spent. Some of them don't even know who they are afterward, Dionysus says softly. That's the fringe tidbit. There are recorded cases, anecdotal of course, of actors who became so submerged in their roles they emerged altered. Some claimed they couldn't shake off the voices of gods or heroes for days. Others simply disappeared for a while. One even declared himself a minor oracle and moved to a cave. Whether true or theatrical gossip, it blurs the line between play and ritual even further. Acting, Dionysus says, wasn't just entertainment, it was dangerous empathy. You nod, watching Theodokos sip water and stare at his mask like it might start whispering again. There's something haunting about how fragile the whole thing is. A performance, no matter how powerful, vanishes the moment it ends. And yet it lingers, somewhere between memory and myth. That scene where he wept. It's already becoming part of your night, part of this dream journey. You leave the backstage area as quietly as you arrived, stepping back into the field under the stars. The cicadas haven't missed a beat. One particularly loud one buzzes near your ear, and Dionysus hurls a grape at it with startling accuracy. Do you miss it? You ask. The old days? He considers this for a long moment. No, he says, because people are still doing it. They just call it something else now. He points up at the sky. Somewhere out there, a kid just filmed herself doing a monologue in her garage. She thinks it's silly. She doesn't know she's carrying my torch. You smile. The god of wine and drama and chaos and comfort leans back into the grass with a sigh. The night stretches on, and the story continues. The grass slowly turns to marble beneath your fingertips. One blink later, and you're no longer under stars, but beneath a grand colonnade, wrapped in torchlight and murmuring voices. You've arrived at the heart of it all, the city Dionysia. In Athens, that thunderous week each spring when the city forgot its taxes, its wars, even its politics, for the theater. Dionysus stands beside you again, now draped in ceremonial robes, with a laurel wreath askew on his curls like he hasn't noticed or doesn't care. This, he says, gesturing grandly, is my official fan convention, and he's not wrong. The city Dionysia was more than a festival. It was an institution, a massive civic event where politics, religion, and performance swirled together into a delirious stew of storytelling and civic pride. Citizens of every class packed the theatron, a massive semicircular auditorium carved into the slope of the Acropolis. Tens of thousands came. You can hear the clamor now, sandals scuffing stone, vendors calling out for olives and honey cakes, children weaving between robes like overly caffeinated goats. Today's schedule? 3 tragedies in a row, that's right. 3 full, emotionally exhausting plays before anyone so much as reaches for a cup of wine. And then, if you're lucky, a satyr play to lighten the mood. Kind of like watching 3 Oscar contenders followed by an episode of The Muppet Show. You're seated next to a man with olive oil stains on his tunic who immediately offers you a fig. Can't cry on an empty stomach, he explains. Mainstream fact, the city Dionysia wasn't optional. Every Athenian citizen was expected to attend, funded by the state if necessary. Participation was part of being a good democratic citizen, like jury duty but with more weeping and better snacks. Playwrights competed for prestige, not money, and winners had their names carved in stone. Which means, Dionysus murmurs, the very first Oscars were hosted by me. You watch as a group of young men in identical cloaks shuffle onto stage, forming a tight semicircle. The chorus. They begin to chant, their voices blending in eerie, beautiful harmony. The story is unfolding, a king grappling with a plague, a woman hiding a deadly secret, a god whose presence is felt but never seen. It could be Oedipus Rex, or the Bacchae, or some lost masterpiece we'll never know, because that's the fringe tidbit. Most ancient Greek plays are gone, lost to fire, time, indifference. Of the hundreds, possibly thousands of plays composed, we have barely 30 complete tragedies today. A drop in an ocean of vanished art. Historians still argue whether that's a tragedy or a relief. Dionysus, Muses. Some of those scripts were, let's say, ambitious. You laugh quietly. Even here, where pathos drips from every syllable, the audience occasionally giggles. A child drops a honey cake. Someone snores. One actor forgets a line and dramatically covers it up with a well-placed shout. You glance up the tiers of seats. There, high above, is a group of foreign visitors, probably from a distant polis. They look as stunned as you feel, not just at the quality of the performance, but at the sheer scale. The theater is alive, not just the actors, but the crowd. The call and response of a shared story. That's the real magic, Dionysus says. The communion, the moment the mask drops for everyone at once. He gestures toward the skene, the stage building behind the actors. Painted panels depict temples and trees. Entrances and exits are coordinated with mythic significance. You spot a McCain, a crude crane system, preparing to lower a god onto the stage for a dramatic reveal. It's absurdly wobbly, and yes, here comes the joke. Dionysus leans over and whispers, "And lo, behold the great and powerful Deus Ex falling." Hazard. Sure enough, the god, played by a very nervous actor, descends with all the grace of a goat strapped to a fishing pole. The crowd gasps, then cheers politely. One woman mutters, "That's not how Apollo stands," but claps anyway. Still, it works. You feel something rise inside you, a flutter, a shiver. Even if you don't understand every word of the dialect, the emotion cuts through. That moment when the chorus sings of inevitable fate. When the hero cries out for a mercy that won't come. When the lights shift and the music slows, and all of Athens holds its breath. There it is. The heartbeat of theater. And you, here in this moment, are not just watching history. You are history, participating, responding, reacting. Dionysus smiles, softly. And to think this all started because I took a nap in a vineyard, you raise an eyebrow. Fine, he admits. A series of naps. A shout rings out. The play has ended. Applause roars. Fig seller man tosses his wreath onto the stage. Someone nearby yells, "Bring back the goat chorus!" You rise slowly. The day is ending, but not the festival. There's still drinking and singing, and impromptu poetry contests to come. Some citizen is already halfway through composing a biting satire about the city council. But for now, the theater stands quiet. Sunlight catches the edge of a column. You feel it, something sacred in the stillness. Like the echo of a song you didn't realize you'd been humming all your life. You and Dionysus walk through the arches, past other patrons blinking in the light. There's joy in their exhaustion. Theater did its job. As you step out into the Athenian streets, you hear the soft thud of sandals. Someone nearby begins rehearsing lines again, voice low, serious. The next story is already beginning. You and Dionysus stroll through the streets of Athens as the sunset stretches everything into gold. The cobblestones glow. Every doorway hums with conversation. You pass clusters of festival-goers still buzzing from the play. Some reciting lines, with exaggerated hand flourishes, others debating which mask was best, or whether the chorus really needed to do that much stomping. But Dionysus waves you into a quieter alleyway, past shuttered stalls and a sleeping cat who's clearly seen. A few festivals. He opens a humble wooden door. Inside, a rehearsal room. Not grand or dramatic, just a quiet space with chalked lines on the floor and some battered props stacked along the walls. A few masks sit neatly on a table. One is cracked down the middle, as if its last performance was too much to bear. Another has a gleefully oversized nose, perfect for satire. "Welcome," Dionysus whispers, "to the soul of it all. This is where the magic's made. Not on the grand stage, but here, in the sweat and laughter and arguing over lines part of theater." You sit on a wooden bench as a group of actors begins warming up. One spins slowly in a circle, arms raised. Another recites verses with increasing speed. A third practices facial expressions, even though, hilariously, she'll wear a mask the whole time. It's earnest. It's awkward. It's kind of beautiful. Mainstream fact, ancient Greek actors trained rigorously. Despite the heavy masks and the need for massive projection, they were expected to convey deep emotion, often while singing, dancing, or dodging stage goats. And rehearsals weren't optional. They were ritualized. Even the way actors stood. Hips slightly forward, shoulders rolled, followed prescribed norms meant to amplify expression. You notice a scroll in the corner. An early draft of a play. The handwriting is hurried. Margins are full of notes like "try again," more thunderous, and "chorus enter angrily, not miffed." That's your fringe tidbit. Some ancient playwrights were full-blown control freaks. Euripides, reportedly, disliked actors so much, he wrote instructions into the meter itself, so they'd perform it his way, or else it wouldn't scan properly. Historians still argue whether this makes him a genius or an unbearable micromanager. You watch an actor struggle with a line. He flubs it 3 times, groans, and sits down hard on the floor. Another actor tosses him a date and says, "It's just Dionysus being weird again." "You'll get it," the struggling actor chews thoughtfully. Then he tries again, this time slower, leaning into the rhythm, letting the mask rest gently on his brow. It clicks. "See?" Dionysus mutters. "They always get it eventually." You smile. Because there's something soothing about watching people work together to tell a story. Even when the budget is a joke, the director is probably drunk, and one actor keeps mixing up their lines about revenge and redemption. But here's the thing. It mattered. Not just to the audience, but to the performers. It was communal. Healing. Actors were both entertainers and spiritual conduits. Some believed they were vessels for the gods. Others, just craftspeople doing their best to keep the spirit of the myth alive. And there's your open debate. Were Greek tragedies religious rituals first, or were they always just theater? Scholars disagree. Some point to the sacred altars on stage, the invocations to deities, the mandatory civic funding. Others argue that while the plays borrowed mythic language, they were ultimately human stories, meant to explore suffering, choice, and chaos from a safe distance. Dionysus shrugs when asked. "I don't mind either way," he says, "as long as they felt something." Rehearsal winds down. One actor gathers the masks gently, humming a tune that sounds like it's older than language. Another sweeps the floor with a palm frond. A third stares at the sky through a narrow window, mouthing lines silently to the moon. And just as you're about to leave, the youngest actor runs up. "Hey!" she says, breathless. "Do you want to try a line?" She holds out a mask. You blink. "Come on. It's just one." "Everyone does it." Dionysus nudges you with an elbow. "We did invent the word hypocrites. You know, the original actor. Means you're already halfway there. So you take the mask. It smells like sweat and wood smoke and something older. Grape leaves, maybe. You place it on your face, and you speak. The line is short. Something about fate, or longing, or time unraveling like thread in the hands of a distracted weaver. You finish, heart pounding. The actors stare. Then they applaud gently, not mocking, just recognizing. You remove the mask slowly. Your cheeks are flushed. Your hands tremble. "That," Dionysus says, "was pretty good." He grins. "Not great, but solid." You laugh. The actors laugh with you, and for a moment, you're one of them. Not a god, not a scholar, just another voice in a long, weird, echoing corridor of stories. Told badly, told beautifully, told because they have to be told. The rehearsal space dims. The actors trickle out into the soft night, carrying their props, their laughter, their doubts. You follow, mask in hand, heart full. Outside, the streets are quiet again. A lyre plays somewhere distant. You can still feel the echo of your own voice hanging in the air. You look at Dionysus. "Still sleepy?" he asks. You nod, but it's the kind of tired that feels earned, like the end of a performance. A slow bow to the dark. The city is quieted now. Even the chatter of the festival has softened into distant murmurs, like waves lapping at the edge of sleep. Dionysus leads you up a hill behind the theater, where olive trees twist in the moonlight and cicadas sing, like ticking clocks. "Let's take the scenic route," he says. "You've seen the play. You've worn the mask. Now you deserve the secret view." The hill is gentle but winding, the kind that makes your legs ache just enough to remind you they exist. Each step stirs up the scent of time and dry earth. Somewhere nearby, an owl hoots and promptly regrets it. Dionysus hoots back in a perfect imitation, and the owl takes flight in what appears to be a fence. You crest the hill, and there it is, the Athenian Acropolis, gleaming white stone against velvet sky. The Parthenon, proud and luminous, flanked by smaller shrines, and, nestled in its shadow, the humble temple of Dionysus himself. No big deal. He shrugs, clearly pleased. Mainstream fact: the Theater of Dionysus at the southern base of the Acropolis was one of the earliest permanent stone theaters in the world. Seating over 15,000 spectators, it laid the literal groundwork for everything from Broadway to Netflix. Fringe tidbit: the theater wasn't just a place for performances, it doubled as a courtroom during certain trials. Imagine being convicted of goat theft under the same marble benches where Oedipus once cried out in existential despair. "Justice and drama," Dionysus says. "We believed in multitasking." You settle on a cool slab of stone beside him, the view stretching endlessly outward, city lights flickering like scattered fireflies, stars sprawled above like a careless god spilled a bag of salt. And here, with the night wrapped around you like a theater curtain, Dionysus tells you a secret. "Well," he says, "not really a secret. More of a misremembered origin story." You raise an eyebrow. He leans in. "They always say I invented theater, but that's not quite it. I accidentally gave humans the gift of permission. To pretend? To play," he corrects. "To wear another face, to cry on purpose, to laugh at pain. I didn't give them stories. They had stories. I just gave them the stage and a little wine and told them it was okay to feel it all out loud." You blink at him. "Historians still argue whether it was religious ecstasy or organized civic therapy," he adds. "But what's the difference?" You nod slowly. It's starting to make sense now. The way the festivals are equal parts revelry and reverence. The way tragedy never arrives without a joke lurking nearby. The way actors train to cry through a mask and still get a laugh when they slip on stage. You and Dionysus sit in comfortable silence. Every so often he plucks an olive and eats it without breaking eye contact. Somehow, this is not weird. Below, Athens hums gently in its sleep. You can almost imagine it breathing, and in that moment, the city seems less like stone and politics, and more like a great stage, one with entrances and exits, lights and shadows, lines half remembered and performed anyway. You know, Dionysus says, most people think I'm just about wine and madness. He picks at a thread on his robe. But I'm also the god of letting go, of stepping outside yourself. That moment in a story where you forget you're you and become someone else. That's me, too. You think of the mask again. The way it felt snug but freeing. The line you spoke without knowing what it meant until you heard yourself say it. He grins. You're starting to get it. You notice something strange now. The stars above are slowly rearranging themselves, gently, subtly, as if the sky itself is shifting for a new performance. The constellation of the goat fades. A new shape emerges, a mask and vine intertwined. You open your mouth to ask if that's supposed to happen, but Dionysus is already snoring softly beside. You back against a sun-warmed stone, arms folded like a smug cat. Don't worry, he mumbles through the nap. Theater runs in cycles. Comedy, tragedy, satyr play, then start again. And it's true. There's a rhythm to all of it. From the grapevine to the stage, from myth to rehearsal to performance to memory. You lie back beside him. The stone is cool. The sky is enormous. You're not sure where the mask ends and your face begins. And for the first time in what feels like centuries, you are both audience and actor, both god and goat. Just another player, waiting for the next cue. When Dionysus wakes, it's without fanfare. No lightning bolts, no choir. Just a sniff, a stretch, and a sneeze brought on by one particularly defiant olive blossom. Right, he says, brushing bits of leaf from his tunic. Time for one more act before intermission. You sit up too, though your limbs protest. Somehow, lying on marble under the stars has left you feeling like a badly folded papyrus scroll. Dionysus, of course, looks freshly sculpted. We've seen the show, he says. We've met the masks, the chorus, the wine, the sleepwalking goat. But you're missing the final part of the ritual. You squint at him. More wine? No, he says, grinning. Worse. Audience participation. He leads you downhill again, winding through the sleeping city until the scent of warm earth and fire-cooked onions reaches your nose. And then you hear it. Soft footfalls, a crackling torch, low voices in rhythmic unison. A procession, not rowdy, not loud, but deeply intentional. A quiet tide of people, wrapped in shawls and wreaths, carrying small bundles, offerings, laurel branches, clay, masks, loaves shaped like eyes, all headed toward the small, unassuming temple at the edge of the theater district. Most people remember the performances, Dionysus whispers. Fewer remember the thank you. Mainstream fact. After the drama competitions of the city Dionysia, there was a formal ceremony. Winners were announced, actors were honored, playwrights were garlanded. But behind the public fanfare there were private rituals, little thank you offerings to Dionysus in exchange for the gift of catharsis. Some brought wine, others brought tears, literal tears, caught in cloth and folded into a bowl. One scroll fragment even mentions a ritual where actors buried their masks in the earth for the night, letting them rest their roles. Fringe tidbit? Archaeologists once uncovered a clay mask with a tiny inscription on the inside that read, "For Aeschylus, so he doesn't haunt me." Scholars still argue whether it was an actor's joke or a genuinely worried fan who thought the late tragedian might disapprove of their performance. You and Dionysus join the crowd. He doesn't walk in front. He doesn't wave. He just falls into step beside a barefoot teenager with olive-stained fingers and a shy smile. She clutches a hand-drawn script of her own. "No lines?" she asks him. "Only if I forget the words," he replies, deadpan. You carry your own small offering, nothing fancy, just a folded piece of parchment with your one line from earlier scribbled in your own hand. It crinkles gently as you walk. Inside the temple, a priest lights incense. The air fills with the scent of cedar and wine dregs. Everyone forms a slow circle. There is no sermon, no speech, just the sound of a single lyre string being plucked, again and again, like a heartbeat. And then, quietly, people begin to step forward one by one. An old woman places a fig at the altar. A child leaves a toy mask painted with more enthusiasm than accuracy. An actor drops his sandals, whispers something like, "You know what I meant," and steps back into the crowd. You take your turn. Place your parchment down. Take a breath and feel lighter. That's the part they forget, Dionysus says later as you exit into the early dawn air. They think theater is about spectacle, but it's just as much about the after, the silence, the exhale, the walk home. The sun is barely peeking over the horizon now. Birds chirp like they've been awake forever. Somewhere, a vendor yawns and lights their morning fire. You and Dionysus find yourselves back at the steps of the now empty theater, just the two of you. The seats like ripples of stone. The stage glowing faintly in the dawn light. You sit. He pours what's left of the wine into 2 cups. "To the nap that started it all," he says. "To the nap," you reply. You clink, and for a moment all the layers, god and mortal, actor and audience, myth and memory, collapse into a single, breathy sigh. Dionysus lies down across a bench, one hand behind his head. "People always talk about tragedy and comedy," he says, "but they forget the third type of play." You raise an eyebrow. He grins. "Nappity." You groan. "Too much?" he asks. You nod. He chuckles. "Good. That means it'll stick." And just like that, the god of theater begins to snore again. Louder this time. One leg flopped off the edge of the bench, his empty wine cup still in hand. You watch the sky lighten. You feel something unwind in your chest and you think, maybe this was the real performance all along. The walking, the talking, the masks, the terrible jokes, the strange comfort of knowing that thousands of years ago, people laughed and wept and yawned at the same stories. And that somewhere, in every theater, someone always falls asleep before the final act. You lean back, close your eyes, and let the curtain fall. The stage is dark now. The theater's marble tiers are empty, kissed by the pink hush of morning. A stray breeze stirs a crumpled prop, a paper crown perhaps, or the folded wing of a forgotten costume. You haven't moved in what feels like an hour. Neither has Dionysus. He lies sprawled like a discarded statue, snoring in full dramatic rhythm. Inhale, pause, exhale with flourish. You wonder how many other dreamers have ended up here. Tourists in togas, sleepwalkers of the soul, people who came for wine and theater and stayed for something stranger, something softer. A small bird hops onto the stage and begins a soliloquy of peeps. You and Dionysus are its only audience. Don't. Give it notes, he murmurs from under his arm. Birds hate direction. You laugh and it echoes lightly across the stones. But the quiet is seeping in now, gentle and persistent, like a tide rising around your ankles. Come on, Dionysus says, yawning. One last thing before you go. He stands, stretches, and gestures for you to follow him back down the path you came from, through the waking city, past fishmongers setting up stalls and bakers brushing flour from their forearms. Every step is slower now, like walking underwater. Eventually you return to the little grove where you first met. The same gnarled olive tree, the same scattered grapeskins. Dionysus turns to you. Here's what no one tells you about myths, he says. They're not lessons. They're not answers. They're just reminders. You tilt your head. Reminders that humans are weird, that gods are worse, that sometimes the best ideas come from naps, and the deepest truths are told in silly costumes. He reaches into his robe and pulls out your folded mask. You drop this. You take it. It's warm. Keep it, he says. You never know when you'll need to play another part. You hesitate. Will I see you again? He smirks. If there's wine, probably. Then, without ceremony, he vanishes. Just like that. One blink, and he's gone. Only the faint smell of grapes lingers. You're alone now. But not really. Because now you carry something. A shape, a story, a softness in your step that wasn't there before. A memory of a god with too many titles and not enough shoes. Of masks, and goats and lines half-whispered through sleep. You begin the walk back home. The mask crinkles in your pocket. Your footsteps find a rhythm. 1, 2, 1, 2. Almost like a chorus, and in the echo of the empty stage you think you hear a voice. Places, please. You smile, because you know now. The show never really ends. Word count, 115. Wind down, 300 words. Now, just rest. Let the stage lights dim in your mind. Let the olive trees fade into gentle shadows. Let the marble benches become soft moss beneath your head. You've wandered through myths tonight, not as a tourist, but as a sleepy actor playing their part with dignity and drowsiness. You've met gods who nap, masks that whisper, and choruses that hum lullabies in ancient Greek. You felt the pulse of a forgotten theater still beating under the earth. And now, there's no need to remember lines, no need to bow, no need to explain how a nap-birthed drama or why laughter and tragedy always hold hands. Let your breath settle. Let your heartbeat echo the rhythm of sandals on stage. Let your dreams be full of amphorae and laurel crowns, of snoring gods and moonlit masks. You are safe here. You are held in the folds of a toga, too soft to be real. You are wrapped in a myth, too boring to be frightening. You are surrounded by a chorus of sleepy historians and gently sarcastic satyrs humming you toward the end of the play. No encores tonight. No reviews. Only the soft sound of applause from a god who dreams in verses, and the curtain falling ever so slowly over the ancient stones. Sleep well, sweet tragedian. The theater will wait for you. End of script. Sweet dreams.